morning and welcome to Unusual Activity powered by Financial Juice. This is George Avedon.
And Milton Mamananis.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Certainly a lot happening in the markets, both overnight and domestic in Asia and domestically. Um, what we'd like to do, we take a quick check on the futures this morning and then do a run through of markets as they closed yesterday and into the overnight Asian European markets. Futures currently up 6.75 at 1976.25. We'll review also the technical analysis of what this means going into today's trading day. In yesterday's close, Dow Jones closed down 0.25% at 17,071. S&P 500 closed down also a 0.25% at 1977.80. Nasdaq closed down 0.14 at 4505.85. If you recall, in the morning it was a risk-off trade. Futures were down quite a bit in the morning. Certainly, we saw a late rebound in the late morning and continued at those levels through the close. We did see a resistance level of 1980, though that resistance level of 1980 was tested. Getting into the overnight in Asia, Nikkei was down 0.84%. Hang Seng is down 1.28%. One of the main things that's certainly happening in Hong Kong are those continuation of the protests and the effect they have on the local economy, and if there's any staying power with that particular headline news. In Europe, the FTSE is down 0.10%. The CAC is up 1.22%, and the DAX is up 0.5%. Excuse me. In commodities, energy and raw materials, we have oil up 0.06 cents at 94.63. We have come up with, we have discussed in the past a range on oil between the 91 and 95 range. So certainly will be interesting discussion points as we approach that 95. Gasoline up 0.0036 at 2.5178. Natural gas down 0.009 at 4.144. Heating oil at 2.7074. We are seeing some weakness in the metals. Gold is at 12.1060, down 820. Silver at 1737, down 0.2, and copper is also lower this morning by $1.20. One of the things to keep in mind, we did see silver last week having some negative days there. So we'll see how that translates into today's trading. One of the things for gold, there is some mention of the Chinese Golden Week that could mean sagging gold prices. So again, interesting to keep an eye on gold. One of the other things to keep an eye on certainly raw materials and metals is this conversation of slowing economies, possibly in China and Europe, and the implication on production. Certainly gold, silver, copper used in a variety of industries, including technology. So that should be a very interesting perspective on where analysts feel that both raw material and precious metal will be heading in the future. Moving on to the rate environment, currently the 10-year at 2.508. We have the 30-year still at 320. We do see a bit of a steeper yield curve compared to 1 month ago. So again, typically a steeper yield curve does point to a improving economy. Uh, but again, analysts are certainly keeping an eye on that. Also keeping an eye on as we uh, listen to the Fed governors in their rhetoric discussion of rates. So again, we'll keep an eye on that yield curve. Um, this morning we're looking for um, uh, 8:55 in the morning, the Red Book, which is a weekly measure of stores, which has changed discounts and department stores. I abbreviated those. 9 o'clock is the Case-Shiller home value index, which is really important. One of the things to keep in mind on that is the Case-Shiller is a lagging indicator. Again, this information is 2 months old. Again, very important, and no doubt will have some implication on, as we've discussed before, the Home Depots, the Lowe's, um, various home builder indices. So that is definitely something to keep in my eye on. But again, keeping in mind that is a lagging indicator with respect to values that are 2 months old. So the consensus is zero point 0.1 versus prior negative zero point 0.2. At 9:45, we're anticipating the Chicago PMI. Um, 10 o'clock is the consumer confidence, estimated at 92.5. 92.4 was prior. 10 o'clock is the State Street Investor Confidence Index. It gauges the holdings, not the sentiment. So this is just this index of where investors have positioned their portfolios. Now, one of the things that is always in discussion is whether or not that's a contrarian view. Um, a lot of folks consider indicators such as this as possible contrarian. So if a lot of folks are, a lot of investors are getting long the market, is this indicative of perhaps a market that's overextended itself? Your thoughts, Milt, when we see indicators um, uh, such as this, when we have a lot of investors very bullish. Great, we always have these. What's your thought on that?
Well, when we have a very bullish sentiment, everyone mentality is on complacency, and they continue with the momentum of the previous action in the markets. The momentum right now is to the upside, and it's been like that for the past few years actually. So whenever we have those dips, like we mentioned, everyone is buying the dips, buying the dips. So clearly, it's still that mentality. But also keep in mind that the more bullish everyone is, the more negative contrarians out there that come out and be like, you know what, that's just a negative indicator. Just like Warren Buffett always says, when there's blood on the street, that's when I'm buying. So when everyone is, complacent in this market, maybe the opposite of what a Buffett mentality will be is when everyone's complacent, I'm selling. Who knows? I'm just saying, but clearly the mentality is to the upside. So until that ends, until that momentum falters, then that's what's going to continue.
Great point, Milt. So keeping an eye on these indicators and having in mind that what it means for the short term, what it means for the long term, where's the overall sentiment. Again, keeping in mind that contrarian uh, type thought process just in the back of your mind. 11:30 a.m. We're anticipating the four-week T-bill auction results. From overseas, we did see UK GDP grows 0.9%. In Germany, we saw a surprise rise in unemployment for a second straight month. Um, they're attributing to this again, take it for what it's worth. They're attributing to this possibly the Ukraine-Russian crisis, uh, trade flows from Eastern Europe. Now, one of the things that we've always talked about is the staying power of certain uh, headlines and then how that headline particularly impacts markets. So we've seen this Ukraine Russia linger for a really long time. There's really no indication that there could be certainly a ceasefire. There's conversation that there's ceasefire may be in question, or maybe not being able to be sustained. Um, so again, the longer these particular news items exist in the marketplace, the longer they will have an effect on the overall macroeconomic environment and more specific, individual economies. Going into just a very quick recap of Evan's speech, one of the things that he talked about inflation, and he talked about that we are not seeing the pull on inflation as the Fed has hoped. So again, that's very interesting thought process. Remember, the Fed's goal of inflation is 2%, currently 1.5. So they're not really seeing that. They're not really seeing that 2% reach yet. So again, interesting perspective on how that affects the fixed income market. Baltic Dry Index up 0.1% to 1,063. So we've done the overnight markets, we've done the commodities, we reviewed the rate environment. What I'd like to do is get into the insider purchases. We always like to do those in the morning. It's beneficial to traders to take a look at what's happening from overnight, basically opinions, actionable opinions from directors, CEOs, CFOs, of the impact, what they're doing with their own money as they're purchasing shares of their own of the companies they work in. So again, it's very important that we keep an eye on that. So SIAF director purchases 150,000 shares at 91 cents. AGCO director purchases 307,000 shares at $45.96. VMEM director purchases 20,000 shares at $4.11. Also CFO, another 10,000 shares at $4.26. EXPE, 10% owner purchases 264,000 at $77.11. That's Liberty Interactive. So if we take a look at each stock, so I'm going to change the. Bear with us. I'm just going to pull up some charts here just for a moment, and okay. And so what I'd like to do is bring up these stocks so we can take a look at them, and see what the average daily volume in these particular securities are. So in SIAF we have. Okay, the average daily volume is 732,000 shares. In AGCO, we have 1.3 average daily volume. VMEM, we have 865,000 shares. We'll take a look at that there. So again, we see that in the morning. VMEM just a bit of a spike there to $4.63. We'll take a look at, and finally EXPE. Okay. EXP, we're not having, not yet. We're not seeing any response in the market yet, and average daily volume EXP is 1.7 million, with the 10% owner buying 264,000 shares at $77.10. So again, very interesting to know. We'll see what the implication is on and when the markets open. We'll switch back into. Bear with us here. Okay. And switching back into our. Okay. Some of the news that's currently in the market. Certainly, everybody's been talking about eBay spin-off of PayPal, anticipating IPO late 2015. We discussed the implication on gold prices from the Chinese Golden Week. The Chinese Golden Week certainly is a 1 week national holiday in China. So again, keeping an eye on that. Also, Johnson and Johnson interpacked to buy Elios Biopharmaceutical for 1.75 billion in cash. If we Johnson and Johnson currently not really having much of an impact yet on Johnson & Johnson, $106.54. Um, Moving on, one of the things we'd like to also monitor during in the morning hours is syndicates. FDUS files automatic shelf. Uh, LAS 300 files a 300 mixed security shelf. A mixed security shelf basically is just a variety of securities for the particular $300 million offering. So this could be a mix of equities, could be a mix of fixed income. So I guess it really is important to take a look at FD. Let's see, take a look and see if LAS has any impact yet on the security. Bear with us. I don't see anything yet. Currently at a dollar. Yesterday's close at $1.95. Milt, when we take a look at these offerings, certainly, especially you mentioned even last week the importance of watching these syndicates, because it could be an indication of where the company how the company wants to use this money. Correct. So I think it's an important something important to monitor.
Of course, it's always something important to monitor, especially if you see a filing regarding selling of shares by holders, which is usually an interesting look. And then, always keep in mind on what the reason of the filing is for. Is it to purchase another company? Do they need the money for that? Is it for general expenses? Is it for, buying back debt? There's always reasons behind a company filing either a mixed shelf, filing to sell shares. It's always smart to keep an eye, read it, and figure out the reason behind that situation. Other than that, it's usually a net negative. You usually see them price it at a lower level, so people really take a close eye on both the reason and usually the pricing of the shelf or the stock or whatever is being done.
Great point, Milt. So if we take a look at continuing on with the syndicates and TSL, we have TSL offering 7 million ADR shares currently at $12.73. So again, we're should be interesting in the morning. We're, as Milton said, it's typically a net negative. Again, what is the company going to use that that money for, right? Is it research? Is it R&D and so forth? So we are seeing in TSL currently at $12.73 in pre-market. In RCAP, selling 464,000 shares of holders currently at not seeing anything yet in pre-market. Finished the day at $23.32. SBRA, they priced the secondary at $24.25. Currently in pre-market, we're at $24.61. Um, One of the things before we get into the upgrades and downgrades, what I'd like to do is maybe spend some time on what we saw yesterday, some of the key support levels that we saw yesterday with respect to the S&P futures. We're certainly seeing a dip in gold. We're seeing the crude oil is still within the range of 91 to 95, and a conversation about work. So let's Milt, if we can get maybe just dive into the S&P futures. Currently, they're up 6. We're at 1975. Certainly that 1980 held, correct? That resistance level yesterday. We had a really interesting open yesterday. What's your take on that? How did that play out?
Well, as we can see, the current resistance and support levels are being held. The support around the 19, I'm looking at the ES futures, the support around the 19, 60 levels is clear support in the in the futures. That 1980 level, is clear resistance. It hit it again yesterday, bounced off of it. Today we're trading, almost right, a little above it to right by it again. So it's going to be a key level to watch. It's a fight, and the question is who's going to win. Is it going to be the Bulls or the Bears? And right now, it's clearly on the Bulls side. Well, they're going to retest it again. Let's see if they have that volume to push it through. If that happens, in all honesty, George, we can possibly retest highs. It's you're looking at not much. Like I'm looking at the SPX now. If that 1980 breaks, you had that 2000, resistance. But after that, it's smooth sailing to, easily new highs. So watch the 1980 level on the SPX. Watch the 2000 level above that for resistance. If those levels are both held and not broken, you may see a little retrace back to the the 1965s on the 1965 support level. Watch those numbers, keep those numbers in check, and if they break with that volume, you need that volume for those breaks. If those breaks happen with that volume, then you may get some significant movements. But until that happens, we're going to be just jumping up and down la la land until we can figure out which direction this market wants to go.
Great point, Mel. One of the things that we want to bring up is, we were talking before the show is this notion of, we're at the end of the quarter. We're at month end. Certainly a new quarter. Typically in portfolio management, right? Portfolio managers take a look at how their portfolio is performing going into the end of the quarter and whether or not they want to hold on to those positions. So do you think we'll see perhaps even a little bit more volatility within the next 1, 2, maybe 3, 3-4 days, where because people are repositioning their portfolios? And what's your thought on that?
Well, I agree. We have the quarter end today. We have that. A lot of people are going to be repositioning their portfolios. They always want to close out in the upswing. So you want to have a new, what is it, like 8 quarters in a row that we're up. So they're going to do whatever they can to keep this market up. Will it work? Who knows? You have a lot of positive news this morning with that eBay. It's going to prop that Nasdaq up. You have all the IPOs going bananas again with the GoPros and the MBLYs. So you're going to have certain areas where people are just going to continue throwing money into. And as of now, clearly the pre-market is reversed off the lows to close to highs. You have some you have the Chicago PMI also coming in at 945. So it's one of those days where the momentum, in all reality, from speaking to desks, is going to be to the upside because they want to make sure they close it on a positive note. No one wants to close the market, the quarter, on a negative note. Well, the Bears do, but no one else but the Bears. And right now, that the momentum is, let's just make it another quarter of, popping champagne, and just keep the bull going, keep everything running. And right now, you have the momentum. You got a lot of big boys up. And until we see some sort of momentum shift, you're going to have your Bears out there. But as of right now, it's an upswing type momentum look. Keep on going Bulls until we look at something different.
Thanks, Mel. So one of the, and remember when we talk about portfolio change, this is clear across the board. Quarter end is hedge fund managers, it's mutual fund managers, it's clear across the board. So this readjusting of portfolios going into the next quarter is clear across the board. So one of the things that's also we want to talk about is the VIX. The VIX is at, if you look at historical. Bear with me. Let me just pop this up. My apologies.
George, one quick thing on the VIX.
Yes, please.
As we've been mentioning for days, the resistance level on that VIX was around what, 17, 1650, 17
and a half to 17 exactly.
Yesterday we hit 1712.
Yep.
Hit the resistance, bounced right off the resistance, and closed at around 1599. So 1598. Sorry about that. So as we can see, the levels are currently in place. It's clearly, in my opinion, a very technical market. So you may see that 17 number being hit numerous times. If it cannot be broken, we're going to see that 14 handle again very soon. But if it's broken, in my opinion, we could easily see in the 20s before we see some sort of reversal. So watch that number, guys. As you can see on a chart, you put up a chart, that 17 number hit it to the T yesterday, bounced right off of it, close to 1598, at almost a dollar something lower. That seems like the resistance level in that chart.
I think that's a great point, Mel. One of the things that's being discussed is this um, where is normal levels for the VIX, and I know you and I talk about it constantly. If you look at historical levels for the VIX, they're in that 20 to 25 area range, correct? So if we look at the current levels, they're at, if you look at quote unquote historical levels, um, we're at historic lows, right? I mean, certainly we've been lower. We've tested out that 10 levels, 11 levels, 12 levels. Um, but what do you think would propel the VIX coming back
Historic norms?
into historic norms? And also remember, we're going into that October time, right? So
Of course.
and October's uniquely, certainly historically volatile, but we are going into the historic time. It is cause for thought in terms of volatility, right?
Well, one thing, George, on the VIX, like we said, back in the days, we used to be trading the VIXs in the 20s, and everyone was like, that's the norm. It's not negative, it's not positive, it's a neutral. This year, let alone the VIX hit a low of $10.28. Who would have ever thought? If I asked someone 5, 10 years ago with the VIX, no one would ever think that we'd hit 10. So, it's something where, the new norm right now is 13 to 15. That's the new norm. And everyone's complacent with that number. It's a little awkward to me that, the VIX is at such lows. But anything could pop this VIX back up to the 20 levels. We got earnings season coming up. That could be an interesting look. Sorry about that. We have a lot of global economic situations going on with Europe and Asia. Keep an eye on. But as of now, the feel is complacency, like we said earlier. And right now, it's just let the VIX crater on the 15 level. Everyone's happy. Let the markets continue with their run for now. But very very few things can rock this market, and when it is rocked, then you'll definitely see a momentum shift, and you will see the VIX break that 17 number into the 20s, and after that, it's a whole new ballgame. We'll see what happens after that. But like I said, the only thing that I can recommend right now, not even recommend, but suggest is keep an eye on that 17 level on the VIX, and a lot of people are, from what I've spoken with, a lot of desks are playing their trades off of that level.
Thanks for that, Mel. One of the things that we also just want to bring in as we um, when we discuss technical support, certainly crude oil has always been in discussion. We talked about how it's been in a bit of a range between 95 and 91. Crude oil now at 94.50. One of the things that I'm looking at, and what we always talk about is this notion of headline risk with respect to any Lord forbid any economic any terrorist attacks or so forth. But again, the markets are always on the look for these type of environments. Certainly the airstrikes over Syria are continuing. We've been discussing that from last week, and the implication on that. On crude oil in terms of technical support, we've been in a range. The reason why I wanted to bring it up again this morning was, we're at that 94.47, excuse me, down 10 cents, but we're nearing that 95. Anything that you're keeping an eye on? Certainly, we're always on the look for headline risk and certainly a possibility of economic slowdown. an effect of on energy prices and certainly commodity prices, raw materials. But what are you seeing from the technical analysis perspective on crude oil?
Well,
What,
on the technical side, George, real quick, I'm looking at that 95 number that you mentioned. Clearly we're at that resistance level. It'll be interesting to see how the market reacts to that. We hit a high yesterday on crude at around, where was it, 94.90. So it's trying to breach that 95 resistance level. So it's going to be an interesting look. Currently crude is down about 5 cents right now at 94.50s. It's trading in that support range. I mean, in that resistance range. So you're looking at number wise around, like I said previously, around 92.50, 93 to about 95, 95.50 as your range right now. So we're looking at either a break to the upside or downside off those two few numbers. Once that happens, we'd like to see a little volume come in with that, and if that continues, then we may see a significant move either to the upside or downside. But the key levels right now, watching that 95, 95.50-ish level, and to the downside around that 92 and a half, 92 number. It's a pretty $3 range, but it's an interesting range, and that's what we've been trading in the past 3 days. So, mark those numbers down. Other than that, in all honesty, we have a lot going on overseas, and this and that slowdowns talked about in China and Europe, and what's going on in the Ukraine area. So anything could flip the switch. The question is, will what it will be and to what direction it will go to.
That's a great point. Milton brought up volume, and we bring up volume all the time, whether it's volume with respect to insider purchases compared to the average daily volume. We bring up whether it's syndicates, the implication, how traders and investors interpret that particular news, but also in the technical analysis perspective. When you have key support and resistance levels, what's the follow through um, in the volume, right, Mel? I mean, because if you don't have follow through in the volume, really, there's no conviction. We always talk about conviction in the markets. You have to have conviction in the follow through in those particular levels, right? Because without that volume, really, it's just another level, right? You have to have the follow through and conviction within by traders and investors.
Agree. You want to see the volume. Volume is very key, especially when you do technical analysis. It's very key to see the volume on a break on the upside and downside. Unless if you don't see that volume, usually it's an indication that it's not one to really have a close eye on, because not many have noticed that that's the level where it needs to break. So volume is key. Watch the volume on support and resistance breaks. And after that, after you see that conviction on those levels, then you can make your decision.
Perfect. Thanks, Milt. So a couple of things, kind of interesting tidbits. We're going to switch back to our presentation just for the moment. Bear with us one moment. One of the really interesting is, we've been discussing this Bill Gross leaving PIMCO. So there's something circling the news and desks around is an PIMCO ETF managed by Bill Gross sees a record $446 million outflow. Again, we've been talking about this for since Friday, since this news came out on Friday. The implication of the readjustment of the portfolios. It's certainly a higher level perspective, but it's very important to understand that it will have an impact on fixed income and how managers, was there discussion between Bill Gross and other managers of how they manage their particular portfolios, and as he's going into Janus, what impact does that have on the fixed income specifically environment, right, Milt? I mean, this is something that's certainly it's certainly high level, but it's very important to for traders and investors to really keep an eye on, because it will have an impact on, whether immediate or in the long term, have an impact on portfolios. So that's something that we're keeping an eye on. In CNET this morning, interesting public relations this morning. So we may be seeing some activity in CNET. They did have uh, news yesterday, right, Milt, on CNET yesterday, correct?
CNET, George, has been the one on the radars for numerous days. It's an Asian name, Clearly, it's always a cautionary step when you're trading anything overseas. But it's clearly in vogue, as you can see by pulling up a chart. The activity in action from this stock is quite mind-numbing when you think about the fact that this was trading at 55 cents about what, a month and a half ago, and now it's trading at pre-market around $4 a share. So it's clearly in play. It's being mentioned a lot on social media. It's being mentioned a lot. Anytime a PR, even if it's a fluff PR, comes out, they pop the stock up 50 cents. So clearly it's in vogue. Like we always say, when you look at a stock like this, look where it came from, everyone. It came from 55 cents. It was clearly not, a company that everyone was interested in when it's trading at that such a low level, especially when it's below $1. So, clearly it's just in vogue right now. It's being moved on every little headline, every little pop, every little pump. So just when you're trading names like this, be a little cautious, in my opinion. Nothing. Who knows? This thing could be, you know, it could be a very interesting play, but in all reality, it's like, wake up, guys.
What the you'll hear a constant, persistent theme with us is the headline risk, perception in the markets of that particular headline, whether it's a macro headline or specific. For example, CNET this morning. If we take a look at CNET this morning, we have. Currently at $3.98. Yesterday it did reach a high also in the morning of $4.06. So again, names like this, although we are certainly, we bring them up as so traders and investors can monitor these stocks, be involved in these stocks, but also as a cautionary information about the stock. Not just do your homework, but understand the volume implication in these stocks. For example, you saw a huge volume uh, uptick in the security yesterday morning, and then dropped down towards midday, a little bit of a spike in the morning, and then really dropped down in the volume towards the afternoon again. So when there's news, when there's headline news, when there's various information circling desks, and when we mean by desks, it's just about it's hedge funds and mutual funds and various institutions. It's going to have an impact on volume, that the participants flood this particular security, and whether you catch the news on the upswing, or maybe you're the type of trader investor, you wait for the top and you get short on the reversal of the particular of the move. You always have to watch that volume. Volume is key for our conversations, and key for traders as well. Something coming through the wires, as we were just discussing in the pre-market. Russia said to weigh capital controls if net outflows intensify. So again, more macro type information, but we want to watch Russia because they do have an impact on certainly commodities, energy. There was a great, and we'll have that. Hopefully, we'll have that tomorrow for you. There's a great a map of the countries in Europe that rely on Russia for natural gas. So again, I just wanted to just put that in and really think that's important to know. One of the things that we'd like to go into now, we've we've reviewed the syndicates, um, really run through the pre-market upgrades and downgrades, and initiates. Just a real quick check of the futures. Milt, with a Case-Shiller, we saw home prices increase at the slowest pace in almost 2 years. So that's certainly having an impact on S&P futures. We're currently up 1.5. Again, we need to bring out everything into perspective, right? Month end, quarter end. Um, Remember, the Case-Shiller is a 2-month-old lagging indicator number. But
George,
yeah, please
one
go
quick
ahead.
thing. I'm getting a lot of feedback regarding this Russia headline, and it seems like it's bigger than everyone expects it to be. So that's why futures really took a hard downtick on that headline. It's being I'm getting phone calls, I'm getting messages that a lot of people are seeing that as a very negative view on Russia because they said that they were able to control what's going on there regarding all the sanctions and all this, and now clearly headlines are coming through that they're having some capital control issues. So it's something to keep an eye on. When you look at that little sharp downtick from the 1975, we dropped literally 5 handles in like 2 minutes off that once that headline came out. It's coinciding with that Case-Shiller. Case-Shiller was that it's the biggest tumble in home prices since 2011. So it's you look at that and you're like, excuse me.
Take your
But
time.
clearly, we had a sharp downtake off those two headlines.
Absolutely, and remember, we've been bringing this up last couple of days, specifically on oil prices and the effect that oil prices are having on certain countries. For Russia, Iran, Venezuela, there's countries need to have specific prices of oil that they can um, produce oil, refine it, and actually, make money on based on an oil price. So again, very important to know. We're gonna go into.
George, one more thing.
Please, no.
Another thing, as you can see, certain headlines really affect certain markets. Gold literally bounced off that 1206 number. It's currently up close to $10 in the past 3 minutes. So, oil also had a little bounce. So clearly, a lot of people are taking into effect both those headlines and think to themselves, what the repercussions could be. Everyone when something happens, you go to safety. What is safety? Gold. So people are going to gold. People are, pop that trade up 10 close to dollars. You're having the euro break down to new all lows, almost hitting the 125 handles. So you're having a lot of interesting headlines starting to rumble through. Keep an eye on commodities regarding Russia, regarding the euro, regarding you know anything that could be affected if something does happen on an overseas log.
Uh, no, that's a great point. And if you remember last week when we had that, I believe it was on Thursday or Friday when we had that possible terror threat on the Parisian and the New York subway system. We saw a huge tick up in the gold prices, right, Mel? And that, so again, it's that flight to safety. Where's the 10-year? We have a 10-year currently maintaining that 2.504. Again, so when traders, when we take a look at, we do bring up, a lot of macro information, but a lot of macro information does affect overall volatility, not just in the marketplace, but in specific stocks. So it's really important to understand how these particular headline items impact the stocks, individual stocks. Um, so let's get, as you see on your video, the pre-market upgrades. ADUS, we'll run through them a bit. ADU, Addus Home Care race to outperform versus perform at Oppenheimer. AMAG Pharma race to outperform at FBR Capital. Alcoa raised to buy it at Bank of America. And Century Aluminum raised to buy at Bank of America as well. One of the things that Milt brought up last week, typically analysts are a little bit late sometimes, right, Milt, with their raises. We do see raw material prices decrease recently. So again, that's kind of an interesting take on that on specific stocks.
Yeah, George, you're 100% right. When you have when you were talking about the analyst comments, other day, we were talking about coal names being downgraded. Yet again, yesterday, another firm comes out to downgrade them. You sit back and think to yourself, it's like a chain reaction. Another one as well, GPRO, was upgraded the other day, upgraded yesterday, and today upgraded again by another firm. So it's simple chain reaction going around, and clearly everyone's just jumping on the bandwagon. The GoPro upgraded again by Citi. They popped the target from a 70 to a 94, and right now GoPro's trading at what number? 93, 94. It's quite a shocker when multiple firms come out within days that just continue with the barrage of upgrades or downgrades. It's like they have a forum after hours and decide, you know what, we'll downgrade today, you downgrade them the day after, and then you downgrade them, and then we'll have fun and play around, So it's interesting to see all that.
No, good point, Mel. Computer sciences raised to outperform at Raymond James this morning. Remember, CSC. There was some rumbling that they're looking to sell, right, Milt? And again, we see this. We see headline news, or perhaps like some information circling particular trading desks on particular securities. And we see a day after this, for example, in Raymond James, we see an outperform. Yesterday we saw CSC. We saw them rumor or a news going around that they're looking for a sale, right? And now we see an outperform raise, correct?
Oh, of course, So the rumblings were yesterday that they're looking to put themselves up or sell this or sell that, and yet then today we have the commentary coming out on the name. So it's always something to keep an eye on. Clearly, a lot of people sit back and think to themselves, "Come on, it's it's a little awkward to see that, but that's what is done on Wall Street. So, keep an eye on that. You can keep an eye on these upgrades, downgrades, and sometimes a lot of people focus a lot on upgrades and downgrades. You can tell that a lot of emphasis pre-market is on these names. So, go through the list, see the list, and then make your decisions off that.
Absolutely, and we are seeing CSC currently now at $60.31. It did come up to $62 in afternoon trading. So again, watching that volume in the security, watching these upgrades and the effect of these upgrades that have on these particular securities. Just a few more on the upgrades, and we'll move on to downgrades and initiates. Lockheed Martin certainly, and Raytheon raised. Let's see, Lockheed Martin at Stifel, both at Stifel. Remember, there's a military action that's currently being conducted by the U.S. Overseas. So certainly that's again action, and then you see a particular action by headline news. See what's happening out there in the marketplace, and then you see the raise or the lower by the particular analyst. Which I thought was really interesting was Toyota raised to overweight versus neutral. Yesterday, Ford had some rather negative outlook. Yesterday, we did see yesterday Ford really take a tumble towards the afternoon, right, Milt? And I find it interesting that J.P. Morgan raises Toyota. So again, it's an interesting perspective on one company versus another. Clearly, right?
Oh yeah, it's very interesting. As you can see, the action in Ford yesterday was quite shocking. I've never seen a name like that trade so vicious to the downside. off of numbers, and clearly it was shown. It was joined with a lot of the other auto industry names like GMs and the Toyota. But shockingly, with the upgrade this morning on Toyota, it's you know, the thought is, what are they seeing? What are they thinking? What's the feel behind that? So it's going to be an interesting play. We're going to see today if the Ford momentum on on the downside continues, which it is pre-market. It's going to be one to watch because a lot of people always focus on the auto industry as one of the forefronts of the American economy. So if Ford is not performing well, if Ford is not doing well, then you know, is the economy really that good? So it's something to keep an eye on. Ford does have a broad-based view on the whole markets. It's going to be interesting to see if it continues on its downside, or people are going to be like, you know what, it hit its lows. Let's start to nibble a little bit. It seems attractive at these levels, just like people thought with Toyota.
Great point, Mill. So going into the downgrades, our Carbo Ceramics downgraded to underweight to equal weight at Morgan. Um, uh, Stanley Einstein no Bagel downgraded to hold from buy at Jeffries. Kellogg downgraded to underweight from equal weight at Morgan Stanley. Seattle Genetics downgraded to underperform from neutral. And Vitamin Shop downgraded to neutral from overweight at Piper Jeffrey. Um, some of the initiates, again, certainly Apple's been in the news. Certainly another piece of information came out on Apple yesterday was possibly another security breach. CDW initiated with an outperform at RBC Capital. EPAM initiated with positive Susquehanna. Um, let's see. So we see uh, KEX Kirby initiated with neutral at Goldman. NXTD initiated with outperform at Northland, or ORBC initiated at buy at CRT Capital. Again, really the most important things to take a look at with all of these upgrades, downgrades, initiates is a certainly does the stock is the stock in your portfolio? Are you thinking about putting this particular stock in the portfolio? Take a look at the track record of the particular analyst. Have they been correct? If they upgrade today, what's the track record? Month, 2 months, 3 months, a year down the road. A week down the road on the particular security. So again, certainly doing your due diligence. We always discuss that is imperative. So as we begin to wrap up, we'll make a quick recap of the market, see where we're heading in the morning. Uh, let's see, we have the 10-year at 2.506%. We have the S&P futures at up 3.5, and we have oil at 94.55. So one of the things, again, keeping an eye on those ranges that we brought up throughout the show. Certainly a lot of activity, a lot of macro and more detailed information on specific securities. So should prove to be an interesting day. We thank you for joining us. This has been Unusual Activity powered by Financial Juice with George Avedon and Milton Marmonides. We thank you for joining us. Happy hunting.